The Melech Tzibul, Rabbi Melech Tzibul, was our Mashpia in Morristown, 1979 to 1981. We called him Reb Melech. Reb Melech, you could say, was a genius and a goin. A goin is a genius in Torah, in all parts of Torah. But that didn't make him the Mashpia of Morristown for 50 years. That didn't make him special. I mean, that's you don't find many people like that. That's true. But a Melech, as the Rebbe wrote to his Kala before they married, that he's a Baal Midas. He was really, a Baal Midas means someone who was sensitive in character. He had a refined character. The Melech's style was overwhelming you with the breadth and length of Chasidus. Any Chabad Chasidus Sefer that was published, as soon as it came out, he got a hold of it, and he went through the entire thing. Not a little bit here, a little bit there. The entire Sefer, the entire book. And we saw this because all of a sudden, he's learning at his desk before, students started to come to him to ask him questions in the Maimorim, in the discourses that they were learning. And he was learning and shaking away and learning from this Sefer that just came out. So I would go over to him, I would say to Melech, what's this? He says, a Sefer is uitgekomen. A new Sefer came out. Wer wird es lernen? Wer wird es lernen? Who's going to learn it? And when will it be learned? And this was amazing for us. We were like 19, 20 years old. For us to see this, to see a person who literally is learning, is diligent, is refined on top of it all, was tremendous. The Melech's warmth was seen at Farbrengens, especially towards the last hour or so of the Farbrengen and post-Farbrengen. Let me describe this to you. First of all, what he would do at Farbrengens is he would tell stories and stories of Chassidim, much of which he heard from his Mashpia, and what he read. He learned by Reb Shlomo Chaim. He knew Rebbe Avram Mayor well, Reb Shmuel of Witten he heard much from, and others. And he would share that. He remembered. His memory was phenomenal. He didn't forget anything. I'm telling you, he didn't forget. And he would just go, and then another story, and another word. He didn't speak at Farbrengens. It wasn't lectures, sermons. And he didn't speak, very long, half an hour at a time. 10 minutes, a niggin, 10, 15 minutes, a niggin. And it was amazing. And we were like amazed. It was the first time that we heard from a Mashpia so many Hasidic stories of people who either, we knew some of them and some that we didn't know, but our parents, for example, my father was a student of Reb Shlomo Chaim. So Reb Melech was a younger student, so when he would speak about Reb Shlomo Chaim, I gravitated to that because I related to it, because I heard from my father so many things about Reb Shlomo Chaim, the Mashpia Reb Shlomo Chaim Kesselman, or Reb Nesenemenov, or Reb Avram Mayor, or Reb Shmuel of Witten. And he would say a lot of L'chaim. And it was so interesting because we looked at him during the week, he was kind of more to himself, a little colder, You had to come to him. And when you came to him, he answered your questions and he spoke to you. But he wasn't the type of Mashpia that, had much warmth and ava in the sense of outward progression towards you, and and holding you and hugging you and smiling at you. That really wasn't his approach. So knowing him that way, and then all of a sudden at Farbrengens, he says L'chaim, and at 11, 12 at night before we end the Farbrengen, he's I'm not going to say shikr, intoxicated, but he was, nice and happy, and he's smiling, and he's kind of sometimes, says a nice word, and then all of a sudden the Farbrengen finishes, and we sing the niggin that we always sang at the end was I did it, I did it, I did it, I did it, and when we did this, he would get up and we'd all dance in circles, and then he would make a somersault, a kula, and then he said to us, come on, a kula means a somersault. Do it. And this one, do it. And it was so warm. And when we finished that, then he would start walking and to the door and to go down the steps. And we walked with him so that he doesn't fall and that he doesn't get hurt. It was just, it was so a contrast on one hand between someone who's so intellectually motivated and oriented and kind of colder, to someone who's so warm and full of smiles and fun, in a sense. Reb Melech was a deep, deep thinker of Chassidus, really. I think next to Rabbi Yoel Kahn, he was the next deepest understanding, someone who understood Chassidus in the last generation, really. His breadth, and as far as ideas, his knowledge, the quantity, he knew everything. And by the way, he knew a tremendous amount of Nigla. Some say he was even greater in Nigla in Talmud than in Chasidus. He knew Ktsos, Nesivas. He knew all the deepest, commentaries that they learned in the yeshivas and the literature yeshivas and other yeshivas. He knew them all. In fact, he learned with Bacharim these things. And there were times that he had a class in Gemara. So this was something that was very, very special. And in those years, the formative years, when you start, your mind opens, you're 19, you're 20, you start thinking and you start looking at things differently. Having a Jew like him to look at and to hear and to emulate was very, very refreshing. I personally had a very, very close relationship with him. I spoke to him about things that were personal, and he spoke back. He gave back his ideas. He once told my father, he met my father in a shul in Crown Heights, and he said, my father asked him, this was shortly, after I came to Morristown, a while after, he said to my father said, so how's my son doing yeshiva? He says, he calls my father by his first name, and he says, I must tell you, your son, keeps me on my feet, and I love it. I'm not saying this, to toot my horn, really. I'm saying this because the relationship of a student with a teacher can be the greatest relationship. Every relationship has its uniqueness. The student-teacher relationship is a different relationship than the father and son and the employer and the employee and a husband and wife and two brothers or two sisters. It's a different type of relationship. Years later, whenever we saw each other, he would smile and greet me and he'd say, Chaim, how you doing? What are you learning? I remember I once chazed Maimah Chasidis in Rabbi Motla Gerari Shul, Chevra Shas, on the corner of Kingston and Montgomery in Crown Heights. And after the Maimer, he comes over, he says, Chaim Yashikoyach. And he wasn't sitting by the table, but he was sitting, one of the benches, but he was listening. And he gave me, and I felt in the Yashikoyach is, thank you for continuing what I taught you, the importance of Chassidus and to live a Chassidish lifestyle. Reb Melech passed away relatively young, but the thousands of students that continue in his ways today, who are Mashpia themselves, and teachers and rabbis and workers and all kinds, are all part of his, what he left. May Hashem help us that we go bedarkei Rabbeinu Nisienu in learning from a Yid like Reb Melech Tzvibel, the Mashpia of Morristown for 50 years.